So I want to tell you, to begin with, about the first holiday that Laura and I ever took together. Me, Laura, and my brother. Which, it might seem like an odd sort of first holiday for a couple to take, but my brother, who is here this morning, he had to come because he bought the flights. Which is extraordinarily generous. It might have been more generous if we bought 2 flights instead of 3, but he bought these flights, and we were gonna fly to Berlin in Germany. In case there's any other Berlins that anybody else knows about. But the Berlin, the one in Germany, that we were going to go to that one. And he bought the flights, and it was very generous of him. It was at the outset of the budget airline. The budget airline was coming to prominence. So I think you managed to get something like 3 return flights for like 90 quid or something like that. Which, £1,000, I'm sure it was. Now, I don't know when we figured this bit out, but what we didn't realize, which I'm sure we would all take for granted now, 20-odd years later, is that you might think you've bought a flight to Berlin on a budget airline, but it turned out that we'd actually bought a flight that arrived about 45 minutes outside of another city that wasn't Berlin, and was about a 3-hour train journey to Berlin. None of which I remember knowing until we were landed, and having to sort of figure this stuff out in real time without the benefit of Google Translate or Google Maps or anything that Google can provide. None of this stuff was available, and what I remember finding particularly taxing was how at ease Stuart and Laura were about the whole situation. I have a very distinct memory of feeling a lot less like a boyfriend or a brother and more like a scalding parent. And they were there. They weren't very helpful. It was, in my mind, a fairly terrifying prospect. It was the first time undertaking a trip like this, and didn't know where we really were, didn't really know how to get to where we were going, didn't speak the language, and it was a bit nerve-wracking. And all I got from these two was, why don't you try parlez-vous anglais, and je m'appelle, and tout appelle comment, and bof ça va, and it's like, that's French! Germans don't speak French! Oh, sorry. And we got there. And it was quite a formative experience for me, a defining experience in my life. I felt like it was almost one of those moments where you feel like you've become an adult. Become a man, I've taken on that leadership, because otherwise you might be laughing, but it really was very serious. We could have been sleeping on the streets of, I don't know, somewhere in Germany, It was formative. It was a moment where I had to step up to the challenge and be the leader, be the big brother and future husband that I needed to be. I don't know why you're all laughing. It's really serious. It's very, but I thought, think about that. That was a fairly organic moment. But what are the moments in our lives? What are the moments in my children's lives that are their coming of age moments? What are the coming of age moments that we create? What are they? There's a lot of them. You can think, it's like, when you get married, or when you get a job, or when you leave school. Well, you don't have a choice about leaving school. They make you leave school. How is that a coming of age? It's like you're just told, out you go. And, not everyone gets a job, and not everyone gets married. So how is it that we are coming of age? And I think things were a little bit easier in the biblical era. It was a bit more laid out. If you look at Luke, the book of Luke records what is the only story of Jesus' first 30 years of life. Now, there's bits where he's a baby, but he doesn't do much. like practically, right? But he's there. He's very important to the story, but it's how other people do stuff that is important. And then you obviously have a lot of stuff about when he's in his 30 to 33. That first 30 years is largely unmentioned, but there is this one instance in the Bible when he is 12 years old. When he's 12 years old, his parents, let's go into that. 12 years old is really significant for a Jewish boy because it is the point at which they are able to, it's their coming of age. It's a bit where they become a man, where they are able to do what they have a bar mitzvah, and bar mitzvah means they can do good deeds. Good deeds. Now, you might think, well, could they not do good deeds before? And why could you not assume that they've done good deeds previously? It's a bit like if they do something wrong, something, let's say, for instance, they, I don't know, pick an idea off the top of my head, cut down an ancient tree before the age of 12. Say they did something like that, right? It wouldn't be, a child under the age of 12 would not be punished. It would be their parents that would be punished, which seems very unfair to me. But once they've reached the age of 12, then they are considered a man. They are considered that they are responsible for their own actions. And because of that, they can do good deeds. They can't do neither good nor bad deeds before the age of 12, but after the age of 12, they are expected to know God's commandments, and they are now responsible for their life. And another part of it is that they would be expected to take on whatever their father's sort of profession. They would partner with their father's trade and go into business with their father, depending on what they did. And we see in Jesus' life that after this point, he was known as, he was a carpenter. He took on his natural father's profession up until his ministry commenced. And we're going to read this passage from Luke 2, starting in verse 41. His parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem, according to the custom of the feast. When they had finished the days, as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem. And Joseph and his mother did not know it. But supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. So when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem, seeking him. Now, so it was that after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So when they saw him, they were amazed. I suspect that's a rather polite word for what they actually were. Amazed, yes. I can think of some more negative words that they might have felt. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously." And he said to them, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business?" So let's look at this. How did this whole thing happen? So once again, going back to the tradition, typically when groups of people, and it would be like a whole community would be traveling to Jerusalem for the Passover festival, and they would travel in big groups, big communities, big families, extended families. And the way they would work it is that the women and the children would walk ahead, and they would set the pace so that they wouldn't get left behind. And they would walk somewhere like 15 miles. And at the end of that, they would make camp, make the meal, and it would be ready just in time for all the gentlemen to walk in. And I didn't make the rules, right? That's how it was, okay? Doesn't sound that bad. But Jesus, before that point, before the age of 12, would have been considered a child. So, and it says they went there every year. So every year, he would have walked with Mary. That would have been the natural course. He would have walked alongside his mother and in that advanced party. So it would have been natural, and it might have even been that he walked to Jerusalem with his mother, prior to kind of having that sort of bar mitzvah, having that sort of approval put upon him. So it would be understanding, because he'd always walked with Mary, that his parents might have, or Joseph might have thought, oh, he's with Mary. Mary, on the other hand, it's like, well, he's 12 years old now. Surely he's with the men. Surely he's walking with the guys. He's now sort of stepping into that part of his life. And it was only when they all sort of met together that they realized, well, hang on, he's not with you. I thought he was with you. And this seems like a familiar sort of conversation that Laura and I might have. I assumed he was with you. He's always with you. And it's like, well, he should be with you now. He's a young man, isn't he? And and so they obviously figure that out and go, oh my goodness, he's not with us. And so it says that it was 3 days. So it's not like they were searching around the back streets of Jerusalem for 3 days. There was a day that they walked out there without him. Oh no, he's not there. They have to then walk back another day, and then they looked around Jerusalem to see if they could find him. And it says they were seeking him, and I get the impression he wasn't in the first place. And maybe this is a bit of artistic license, but my suspicion is they looked for a boy. They looked for a child. And if you left a child behind in, an enormous city, where are the places you would look for a child? You'd more than likely, you'd go to the authorities, because you'd assume he'd be scared. You'd look, maybe you have some relatives there, so you'd look for familiarity. You might think that he went back to wherever you were lodging. Maybe there was a skate park. You just think about, you go to places that you would expect to find a child, right? That's what you would do, because they were looking for a child. Mm-hmm. But what he was now was he was someone, where he was implied by the purpose that was now placed upon him, that was on his life. Because Jesus, as he said, he was about his Father's business. Yeah. That's where you would find him. That's where he will be. It says in other versions, it says he is in the things of his Father's will, or in the things of God's will. He's in those things. That's where he is 12 years old. He has become a man. He is taking on the things of his Father. He is in his Father's business. And so where was he? He was in the temple. And you have to imagine, this is the Passover feast. There's like various times throughout the year that everyone should come to Jerusalem. But nobody can really afford to do that, or not a lot of people can afford to do that. Passover is the one. Passover is like New Year's Eve. That's the one that everybody comes out for. Everyone is there. So you're going to have, in the temple, you're going to have the who's who of religious scholars. And what are they going to be doing? They're going to be sitting around. They're going to be debating doctrine, pulling sort of passages of the Torah apart. I don't mean like literally, that would be sacrilege. But, they would be there. They'd be discussing. They'd be a hot topic of conversation, be the Messiah, the coming Messiah. How is he going to come? When is he going to come? There would be all of this, this hotbed of conversation at this time. Everybody there. And they walk in. And here is their 12-year-old boy sitting there amongst all of these scholars, and they are astonished by him. Not because I was thinking about this, right? It's a lot easier to talk knowledgeably about something that you know, right? Everybody has a specialist subject, right? Everyone can talk about something, and all you need to really know is a little bit more than the person that you're speaking to, and you seem like an expert, right? Right? I mean, you just need to be a little bit ahead, and you seem like you know it all. What is way harder is to step into somebody else's specialist subject and start asking penetrating questions. Because a question that's, sort of makes a person who they think this is their subject. You can't get one over on me on this. This is what I've dedicated my life to doing this. And here's a 12-year-old boy asking questions that is leaving them amazed and astonished. It was not about his age. It wasn't like he was astonishing for a 12-year-old. He was astonishing. He was putting them on notice, and they're asking questions that they did not have answers for. He was surprising. He was surprising because how would some 12-year-old from the bad side of town, and Nazareth was the bad, they called him the Nazarene. That was an insult. That wasn't just a name to call him. That was like, he's from the bad side of town. So he wouldn't have been sitting under any prestigious scholar. There wouldn't have been a prestigious scholar, a prestigious teacher there. Who would have expected a 12-year-old poor boy to be able to read the Torah, even own a Torah, to be able to speak knowledgeably about any of this? There weren't podcasts, there weren't YouTube, there wasn't an easy way to absorb somebody else's understanding. You had to be there, and so it was totally puzzling for these teachers to hear a boy talk and have this understanding of the nature of God, to have an appreciation of God that belied his status. And Jesus was always surprising. It was always surprising. When he came, they were expecting, when they expected a Messiah, they expected a conqueror. They expected a king to come down at the head of an army and free the children of God from their servitude to Rome, to put them back on top, to bring them back to the times of David and Solomon. That's what they expected the Son of God, the Messiah, to be. He was a prince, but he was the Prince of Peace. That's who he came as. Came with no airs and graces. Came from a humble birth. He broke the mold. He was the last thing any of them expected. He was, rather than the all-conquering king, he was the lamb that was to be slain. Pay the sin, to pay the price of sin. And this was the business that he was graduating into. This was the business that he had recognized for himself, that he had been moved by this divine compulsion to do the Father's will. Be a sacrifice for man. And I think about this I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like, Jesus said, I'm about my Father's business. And I've begun asking myself, am I about my Father's business? And if I'm not, whose business am I about? You know, have I made another my Father, my God with a small g? Have I made their business? Have I prioritized that business above all else? I recognize that when I'm on my own, or in my own thoughts, I should probably say, I'm very seldom alone. When I'm alone in my thoughts, I find ways to make them busy, to not just quiet. Like I have to think through things. I do stuff, think about things that aren't like right in front of me, but it's like I'll go and prepare something for 3 days away that maybe could have been just stuff like that, a busyness that I allow, that I entertain, to satisfy my impatience, to satisfy my unwillingness to be quiet. But something that I have changed in my life quite recently. I always, I love worship. I love coming and just praising God. But I for a long time, I wasn't, interested when, walking to and from work or in the car or, putting on worship music. It was like, it comes across like background noise. And, but then I would just put other background noise on. I put on the radio. I'd listen to a podcast. And I'd allow that to busy my mind. I'd allow that to occupy my mind. But I have recently sort of changed that and said, that stuff is junk. It's junk, and it wasn't adding anything. It was taking what should have been quiet and what would have required patience, and it was just giving me the instant hit, the instant gratification, the instant satisfaction. And so I've taken those moments and filled them with worship. And what I've begun to find is that in those quiet times, up in this morning even, standing in the kitchen, I have a song going on in my head now. A song that hadn't been there for a long time. Just not a song that I can sing very well. Definitely not a song I know the words to. But a song just in the background, an idea, a tune, but something that I know it honors God and just puts him first, and it just creates a space for his voice to be heard, for his voice to rise above anything else. That's what the patience has brought me, that the entire aim, when Jesus died upon the cross, and I'll go into that a little bit more, but was to create a way for us to have a relationship with God so that he can speak into our lives. So he can speak into your life personally. Not that you need to have a teacher who explains it, although it's good to have teachers, but not to be reliant on another person's revelation in order to have a relationship with God. God has now made it such that you can have one that is organic, one that is real, one that builds over time as you build a relationship. That is what he planned. That was what his purpose was, that we could have that. I was walking to work last week, and it was really early start. And it was still dark, and I was wrapped up really warm. And I had a cup of coffee, black, hot coffee. And I just walked far enough. I now know this well enough because I do it all the time. I've turned that corner, I can drink the coffee. The coffee is now not going to burn my lips. Right? And I just was walking. I would love to say I had that song in my heart. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I feel as if I would be embellishing if I said that I did. But I was open, if nothing else. And I took this drink of coffee, and I felt instantly warmed. And I know the joke is, it's the coffee, right? But it wasn't the coffee. I felt this warming. I felt like this laser beam of love from heaven just into my heart. And I can only really describe it as being like I've got this sense of God's pride in his wee boy just trudging off to work that day. Just this love. Just that, I wasn't going to, sort of part any Red Seas or anything like that. I was just going into the office to write some procedures and send some emails, that's all I was there to do. But question started again. It was, am I about my Father's business today? Today. Wow. It was personal. It was to me. And it wasn't, because I had asked this question before, but it was just hypothetical. You read a verse, and you might have done this. You take the verse, you turn it inside out, upside down, look at it from other perspectives to try and get a sense of what God might be saying, and maybe try and make it not mean what you know it means. And that wasn't this. This was personal. This was, he had expressed a love to me that, I know in my mind, I know, I confess it, but to have something personal, something profound in the midst of the mundane, unexpected, not prepared, not something that I just had let myself be open, allowed him to speak into me, and what he drew out of me was his purpose on your life. Today is a day not to go through it just blank. Not to go through it with headphones on. Right? Not to go through it with the voice of everybody else but me. Let my voice guide you this day. Because there was business to be transacted that day. I can't remember what we did. I think the Red Sea stayed pretty flat. I think my office is still there. But I entered all of that with a different frame of mind. Yeah. How invested are we in God's business? Maybe it's the difference of thinking it as God's business as opposed to my Father's business. Because my Father's business, my family's business, my business. It's my business. It's my responsibility. It's my passion. It belongs to me. I have ownership over it. Right? My Father's business. I never followed in my father's footsteps in like a career sense. I pursued a career in engineering, and I'd like to think that after 20-something years of doing it, that I am a professional engineer. That's what I hope, that's what I aspire in a career sense to be. But I can trace that 20-odd year journey back to an innocuous comment. An innocuous comment my dad made while I was filling in my UCAS form. And I'm like not really sure what I want to do. I'm 17 years old. How am I supposed to know what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I can't remember the context. I can't remember how it came out, but I distinctly, to this day, remember him saying, "Oh, they'll always need engineers." Wisdom. Amen. Imagine he'd said, children's parties always need a clown. Imagine that. I'd be downstairs right now, that's right. Just a word. Just a word. Changes life. It's the word of God upon us. Son, daughter, come this way. Because he's a creator. His words are creative. When he speaks a word over you, it is not empty. Yeah. It has purpose. Yes. It creates. Yeah. He creates a vision, shapes a vision in your mind. And off that vision manifests action. Mm-hmm. Implies purpose. Yeah. If we fast forward in Jesus' life, age 12, add, 21 years later. I have no conclusion on this particular part, but 12, 21, it's the same number back to front. And they both add to 3, and he's now at age 33. I'm not saying that means anything, but for maybe someone smarter in the room. But that's wild, right? That's just maths. It's how God shows us he's perfect, right? That just even the tiniest insignificant details add up. I don't know. I think that's cool anyway. Jesus, 33 years later, hanging upon a cross. We join him here in John 19, verse 28. Where everything, almost everything has been done. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, "I thirst." Now a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine and put it on hyssop and put it to his mouth. So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. I'm going to take a quick aside, just a very quick one, on that sour wine. That sour wine was the final insult. Don't confuse it. It wasn't the same wine. He was offered wine mixed with myrrh on the way to the cross. That could have been perceived as a kindness. It was a way to deaden the pain that he was about to endure. He refused it. But in this moment, he was offered sour wine. Sour wine would have been like the normal stuff that the Roman soldiers would have drunk. It would be like fortified, strong, brutal stuff. And he And that was, he says, I'm thirsty. And the Romans are, oh, this will be a good one. This is the prank that we'll play on him. We'll give him something. He doesn't know what it really is. This sour wine will stupefy his mind. It will stop him going into shock. It will extend the torment. It will prolong the agony. It will keep him in that place of, his body would have been just under such duress. Just the extreme of human capacity. Just redlined to the absolute limit. And they're like, how can we just stretch this out a little bit longer? We'll give him, he needs to drink. And they exploit this basic human need. I need a drink, so I will give you this instead. And the reason I mention this is because that's the devil right there every time. Devil, every time, he exploits the needs of our life. Whatever it is, we seek for it. And when we don't look for it in God, we look for it elsewhere. And it might be anything. It might be, you might be seeking love. You might seek love. You might think you have love. But it was actually control all along. Control all along. How often does the devil substitute that which we need, that which we hoped for? It gives us something that just puts another hook in us. Puts us even further into captivity, even puts us further into debt. Yeah. That's the work of the enemy. And it was like at this point, Jesus, once he had exposed every single device of the enemy, taken upon himself every ploy that the enemy could muster, said, now I've got it all. Now I've got every single piece of what he has done to my people. Now it's finished. Now it is finished. Finished. The work of redemption was now complete. That word, it is finished, when it is translated from Greek, it's the same wording, the same statement that you would find on tax receipts that says all debts paid. All debts paid. That's what he was saying. All the debt of mankind is paid. It's finished. It's finished. Every single thing, every lie, every trick of the enemy, it's finished. Amen. I've taken it all. I've taken it upon my life, and he gave up his spirit willingly. He released it. Nobody took it from him. And once the work was complete, I release it. Yes. And it was finished. Yeah. Then it started. Yeah. Then he started us. He started us. He commissioned us that he had made a way. His life and his death and his resurrection made a way for you, I, and everybody else can enter into relationship with God, can be freed of whatever burden, whatever sin we might have felt, whatever regret, whatever misery we might have held upon our lives. Free, released, finished. We enter the way that he has forged, all debts settled. But Jesus took business to greater heights. And I'm just going to finish on this last verse. John 14, verse 12. Most assuredly, so you know he means it, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also, and greater works than these he will do, because I go to my Father, and whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. Greater things than these. You think about just when Jesus died, and those years afterwards, just the faith, the way, was this small niche offshoot of Judaism, whereas today, It is a civilization-defining move of God, where millions and millions of people confess him as Lord and Savior, where entire societies have been built upon the foundation of what Jesus did upon the cross. Greater things than these. Yeah. Don't ever doubt that he can't do greater things. Yeah. Because we live in the midst of greater things. You are here today in the greater things. So you carry with yourself greatness. The greatness of God expressed in us. Because he is in the business of people. He is in the business of you. He's in the business of wherever you are right now. You might be lost. You might be alone. He's in the business of loving you. You might be sick, in pain, discomfort. He is in the business of healing you. You might feel oppressed, a heaviness in your heart. He is in the midst of liberating you. God is in the business of setting you free and redeeming you as a son and a daughter in his house to be a part of his business. You aren't a child any longer. Still a child of God. Just stand with me for a second. Just one last thing. In that first passage that we read, there's a little phrase that just stuck with me. The boy Jesus lingered in Jerusalem. Lingered. Didn't exactly get lost, did he? He didn't. It wasn't all unintentional. He lingered. Why did he linger? Because the presence of God was near at hand. Yeah. The temple that housed his presence, that housed him. Father calling. And he couldn't, where did he go? He went right to where his father was. Because he had to hear his father. He had to know his word. He had to be reassured of his purpose. And let us linger. Let us linger in the midst of his presence.